My brother overheard his wife asking me to pay to edit out my disabled daughter from their wedding photos and immediately kicked her out. My younger brother David married Amelia, the joy of his life, just 2 weeks ago in a lovely and touching ceremony. Everyone who knew David could tell how much he loved Amelia, and he had been anticipating this day for a long time. Their invitation cards made it apparent that their wedding was once intended to be a totally child-free affair. That being said, David called me a few weeks prior to the wedding. He surprised me by telling me that he wanted to make an exception for my daughter Katie, who is his niece. Startled, I asked him if he was certain. David told me how much he adores Katie and that without her as their flower girl, he couldn't have the wedding. Hearing him say it nearly brought me to tears. Uncle David has always had a special place in Katie's heart, and she adores him. David reassured me that he had discussed it with his bride, and she was also in agreement. His sincerity was evident in his voice. He realized how much it would mean to Katie and didn't want her to miss such a significant day in his life. To put things in perspective, my daughter Katie was partially paralyzed at birth. The fact that she is unable to move her body beneath her arms has undoubtedly changed our lives. My husband Roger and I were devastated as parents when we first learned. The ground seemed to have been yanked out from beneath us. We refused to accept the diagnosis and were in total astonishment. We visited several doctors in a frantic attempt to get a different viewpoint in the hopes that someone could know the answer. We hoped for positive results from every test we could think of. We wanted to think that there could be a procedure or therapy available that could help Katie and give her the life she was due. However, the response was always the same, regardless of our actions or where we went, nothing could be done. It was really difficult to accept that our daughter's situation was irreversible. We went through a difficult period that was full of tears, insomnia, and unanswered questions. We were totally powerless. Every time we considered Katie's future, our hearts ached while we gazed at our darling daughter. We gradually started to locate and establish connections with other families who were traveling the same path as us, which provided us with some comfort despite the overwhelming sense of powerlessness. We began concentrating on what Katie could do and providing her with as much love and support as we could, rather than on what she couldn't accomplish. Uncle David is among those who have consistently brought Katie happiness and light. Her illness never caused him to treat her differently. He actually has a knack of making my daughter feel so relaxed and at ease that her illness seems to vanish when they are together. I've always valued this, especially when other family members can occasionally, even unintentionally, make situations difficult or uncomfortable. For instance, my own mother was obviously shaken when she first saw Katie after she was born and saw how paralyzed she was. Her response surprised me, even though I knew it was a tough thing for her to digest. Rather than provide consolation or encouragement, she drew me away and whispered that I ought to attempt to conceive another child. One that could walk. When I heard her remarks, my eyes widened in surprise. My mother persisted in pressuring me, suggesting that perhaps if I tried again, I would have a better baby. It seemed as though Katie's illness made her insufficient or unworthy. I was taken aback. What a callous thing it was to say. David, however, defended me right away and chastised our mother for being so callous and cruel. He assured her that Katie was ideal just the way she was and that she didn't require comparison or replacement. When he stood up for my child, I will always remember the ferocity in his voice. When I was still grieving and accepting the reality of Katie's condition, he chastised our mother for pressuring me to become pregnant. Since then, I have minimized my interaction with my mother and have forbidden her from spending any alone time with Katie. In the meantime, David would visit my daughter every weekend, rain or shine, simply to be with her. They would play games, watch ridiculous shows, or just joke around for hours. Katie would light up for a few hours on those weekends in a way that was so innocent and happy. She can simply be a child enjoying herself with her worldly favorite. Both she and we have benefited from their relationship. I was therefore really moved when he called to ask if I might make an exception so that my daughter may attend his wedding. In addition to being a lovely way for David to celebrate their relationship on his special day, I knew that letting Katie be there would mean the world to her. I was thrilled for Katie to be a flower girl, so I consented to bring her along. I don't believe his wife Amelia was as excited about the prospect of having Katie at the wedding as David was. Amelia contacted me directly a few days after David called to give me the invitation for Katie. She told me that in order for her to let Katie attend their wedding, she had some requirements. The conditions annoyed me because they were strangely detailed. Initially, Amelia demanded that Katie wear a beige dress, which she described as flowing and appropriate for the wedding atmosphere. She also stated that Katie's hair had to be styled so as not to detract from the beauty of the wedding. Her demands were so domineering that I was surprised. But I decided to keep my mouth shut. After all, we had to follow her wedding theme because it was her wedding. I nodded in agreement and promised to follow her instructions because I didn't want to cause any conflict or discomfort for David. Ultimately, my top priority was for Katie to be able to support her uncle. I went out right away and got Katie a gorgeous beige dress. Amelia urged me to purchase it since it was understated yet sophisticated. My daughter would feel unique, I knew. Since Amelia had requested that I give her a photograph of the outfit after I bought it, I snapped a picture of it and sent it to her. To my astonishment, she wasn't satisfied, even though I had anticipated she would be. Amelia soon responded that the garment appeared lifeless and was too bland. "I would like something a bit more colorful," she replied. I was perplexed and angry. Isn't this precisely what she requested? I didn't want to protest or argue, though. I was trying to maintain the peace as best I could. This time, I chose to send her a couple options before making a purchase rather than wasting my money on another dress that I bought on my own. I didn't want to spend money on something that she would undoubtedly turn down once more. When Amelia eventually selected one of the outfits I had received, I was astounded by what I saw. The dress she picked was almost the exact same shade of beige as the one I had previously purchased, which she had critiqued for being too beige. The slightest trace of a pinkish tone, which was almost perceptible, was the sole difference. I began to realize then that this had nothing to do with the dress or the color. Amelia was purposely complicating matters. She seemed to be putting me to the test or creating barriers to force me to do things that I didn't want to do. She hadn't told me outright, but there might be a reason why she didn't want my daughter to attend the wedding. I didn't want to cause her any unnecessary trouble. She needed to speak with my brother and work things out if she wanted to remove my daughter from the invitation. But she never did, and the wedding proceeded according to schedule. Katie looked magnificent as she walked down the aisle in her gorgeous beige dress, the one that Amelia had finally approved, on the day of my brother's wedding. As she wheeled forward, the dress flowed elegantly, and she paused to fling flower petals, her face beaming with joy. The whole room seems to stop. The visitors let out a loud gasp, and then there was a round of applause. As she continued down the aisle, distributing flowers and making her steady progress in her wheelchair, I could feel the excitement emanating from her as people couldn't stop gushing about how lovely she looked. At that moment, I was overcome with pride and love for my daughter. One of the memories I will always cherish is seeing her there, taking full part in such a momentous occasion. My eyes filled with tears of happiness, and I looked at David, whose face reflected mine. He grinned warmly and proudly as he gazed at Katie, obviously moved by her presence and her luminous personality. David approached her as she arrived at the front and knelt down to offer her a warm embrace. Their heartfelt moment together revealed a lot about their strong relationship. After ensuring she was comfortable and able to participate in the ceremony from the front row, he assisted her in positioning herself to the side. Amelia started walking down the aisle a short while later. As she made her way to the altar, she was undoubtedly stunning in her wedding gown. I couldn't help but notice that she looked at Katie for a moment. I briefly hoped that she might smile at my daughter, showing some appreciation for her presence and the part she played in this significant day. However, without even a faint grin, Amelia gazed past Katie and rolled her eyes visibly. It was impossible for me not to feel disappointed. Nevertheless, I decided to ignore the idea because I didn't want anything to ruin the day's happiness. I was ecstatic for my brother when David and Amelia exchanged vows and the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Nothing else mattered at that time since he had at last found someone with whom to share his life. His happiness filled my heart with pride and happiness. We got together as a family for photos during the photo session following the ceremony. David made sure Katie was in every photo we took, and the love and solidarity we all had that day were captured in a ton of images. I couldn't help but notice that Amelia seemed a little strange during the photo shoot. I initially assumed that she was simply weary because she kept huffing and moaning heavily. Weddings are tiring, so perhaps she just needed a respite from shooting so many pictures. However, her behavior got more difficult to ignore as the session went on. Amelia's expression changed considerably as David took Katie up and held her in his arms for a photo. Her eyes were fixed on them, and she had a dissatisfied smile that wavered. Though subtle, it was obvious enough to unnerve me. Amelia approached me after we had taken a number of shots with Katie, asking if I could wheel her out so she could take some pictures with her family alone. Her tone was courteous but short. I was surprised by the request, but I granted it. Katie and I went to the reception to sit with my parents. I was fortunate to have a daughter like her, my mother said, acknowledging my daughter's beauty. Although it was a little gesture, I was pleased to see my mother overcoming her prejudices and coming to terms with my daughter's identity. What mattered most to me was that Katie appeared to have had a pleasant day overall, blissfully ignorant of any strain. From the photos and anecdotes David shared on social media, It appeared that Amelia and David were having a great time on their honeymoon after the wedding. He deserved to savor this unique moment with his new bride, therefore I was pleased for him. After they got back from their honeymoon, David asked Roger, our parents, and me to lunch at his new house. Since we hadn't actually spoken much since the wedding, I was excited to see him again at what was supposed to be a laid-back family get-together. My mom and I have reunited in a surprising way since the wedding. She had taken the time to fully apologize to me for her remarks about Katie and her encouragement to try for another child years prior. She was truly sorry, and even though I was still wary, I was glad that she had acknowledged the hurt her remarks had caused. When David saw Katie again during lunch, he was ecstatic. He enthusiastically produced a selection of presents he had brought back for her from their honeymoon as soon as we got to his house. He had obviously given each one much consideration, and when Katie opened them, her face glowed with delight. As usual, David was totally absorbed in her, asking her about her favorite aspect of the wedding and told her how much everyone had been praising her for her involvement. She was beaming from ear to ear. He often expressed his pride in her, telling her that friends and family had called him to tell him how well Katie had done after the wedding. Katie was so proud to hear all of these praises, and her eyes were sparkling with joy. But I couldn't help but observe Amelia as my brother showered Katie with love. I kept a tight eye on her, and it became clear to me that she was not feeling as excited as David. She didn't even recognize Katie, let alone smile. Rather, she appeared clearly irritated, as though David's conversation with Katie had somehow annoyed her. Her face was a mixture of frustration and anger, and she hardly spoke to anyone while David concentrated on Katie. She seemed to be eager for the moment to end so that he would stop focusing on my daughter. Naturally, David was totally unaware of his wife's behavior. As a family, we relaxed and chatted in the living room after lunch. Amelia approached me at that moment and subtly requested that we speak in private. I already knew what was about to happen, so I felt a knot form in my gut. Since the wedding day, I had been preparing for this discussion. I nodded in agreement, bracing myself for what I knew would be a challenging conversation. We sat down to chat after Amelia showed me to one of the bedrooms. She began by praising me for doing a fantastic job with Katie, meeting all of her requirements, and honoring my promise about how Katie would look at the wedding. I thanked her and nodded, explaining that it was her special day and I wanted to show her respect. After a moment, she said that although she valued my work, she had been bothered by something ever since the wedding. My heart fell. Amelia brought up the wedding pictures on her phone and browsed through the photographer's selection. I came across pictures of David, Amelia, Katie, myself, and the other family members all grinning and savoring the time spent together. Her tone became icy as she paused on a single image and gestured at it. She said, "Look at this," as she enlarged the picture. We were all grinning and looking content in one of the family pictures, with Katie in her wheelchair next to David. Katie gave me a disdainful look as Amelia's finger lingered over her. Her voice was piercing and poisonous as she asked, "Do you see how your stupid kid in a wheelchair is ruining the vibe of the entire picture?" I had trouble breathing for a while. I was stunned. How could she have spoken about my daughter in such a callous and nasty way? I was instantly filled with rage. It was intolerable that my darling daughter, who had done her best to join in the festivities, was now being held responsible for spoiling the mood. I retorted, reminding Amelia that she was aware from the beginning that Katie was in a wheelchair and that she had no right to talk about Katie in that manner. My daughter had no choice but to pose for pictures. How else could she have possibly participated? I responded. Despite my arguments, Amelia sneered and said, "That's not my problem," adding that seeing Katie's wheelchair in every photograph was an eyesore that had made it difficult for her to see the wedding photos. She went on to say that I ought to compensate her for allowing my daughter to ruin her wedding, as if that weren't enough. Her arrogance horrified me. I was so surprised that she would make such an absurd demand that I raised my voice and asked her what sort of compensation she was even referring to. Amelia hit me with her actual demand at that point. According to her, I would have to hire a photo editor to either remove Katie from the wedding shots or, at the absolute least, make her appear to be wheelchair-free. I let out an incredulous gasp. How could she possibly believe it was okay to remove my kid from the wedding pictures or change her identity for the sake of appearance? This was the tipping point. I was at my breaking point. "Are you serious?" I yelled, my voice full of incredulity. "You want me to pay someone to erase my daughter or pretend she isn't in a wheelchair? You're an a-hole, Amelia. I am proud of my daughter exactly the way she is, and I will not be paying for any kind of Photoshop. If you had such a problem with her being part of the wedding, then you should have never let her be the flower girl in the first place." Amelia countered by claiming that although she had done everything in her power to stop David from allowing Katie to be their flower girl, he could not agree because his love for her was so blind. She told me that she was aware that he would have called off the wedding if she had persisted on not inviting my daughter. When I discovered that this woman had been so bitter about Katie, I shook my head. I was shocked by the callousness and heartlessness of her logic. I sternly reprimanded her, telling her that my kid was a real person with feelings and didn't deserve to be hated in this manner. She had been truly thrilled to attend their wedding because she liked her uncle. Now that Amelia was my sister-in-law, she certainly didn't deserve to be treated this way. Amelia, however, seemed unconcerned. She countered by claiming that Katie and I were both attention seekers and that I should remember that Katie's disability was the sole reason people had taken such an interest in her during the wedding. Something inside of me exploded at the disgustingness of her comments. My long simmering anger suddenly erupted, and I slapped Amelia before I really realized what I was doing. The silence of the room reverberated with the sound of my palm touching her face. My hand was shaking as I stood there, and the weight of everything that had just transpired was heaving in my chest. Amelia's eyes widened incredulously, and her cheeks turned scarlet with horror. My brother, my husband, and my parents stormed into the room before she could react. Amelia was questioned by my brother about whether or not she meant what she had said about Katie. Amelia's eyes grew wide with insight. As it happens, David had been listening in on our entire talk and had probably heard all of her nasty and deceptive comments. Her face lit up with panic, and she made a desperate attempt to retract her statement, fumbling over her words. However, it was too late. David's voice filled the room as he screamed at her, accusing her of being arrogant and cunning for dragging me aside to discuss my daughter in such a manner. His voice was a mix of grief and rage as he said, "I can't believe you manipulated me into thinking you were a nice person when in reality you hate my family this much." He was clearly seeing Amelia for who she truly was, someone who had concealed her actual sentiments all along, and the displeasure in his tone was evident. Desperate to save face, Amelia attempted to counter the argument. As she spoke, her voice wavered. "I don't hate your family exactly. This is just about Katie," she added. Then, in an attempt to change the subject, she accused David of constantly giving preference to Katie over everyone else because he felt sorry for her due to her disability. She asserted that he should stop giving Katie so much attention and instead concentrate on their marriage because she was his wife and should receive more of his attention. Then, feeling embarrassed, Amelia started to gripe about how inviting Katie had caused some of her friends to subsequently make fun of her wedding photos. According to her, this is why she wanted to remove Katie from the pictures in Photoshop so she could always remember their lovely day free of such ugliness. David, fortunately, wasn't having it. He advised her to quit being so arrogant and to stop acting as though his niece might have ruined their photos. He claimed that her presence enhanced the beauty of the photos. "I love Katie like my own daughter," he stated. "Giving attention to her doesn't take away anything from you. The fact that I even have to explain this goes to show how cheap your mentality is. Katie is part of my family, and if you hate her this much, then I can't be married to you." When David's comments struck Amelia, her face became white. He gave her a clear look that made it clear he wasn't going to overlook this. "You're an ableist," he continued, repeating what I had said before. "The fact that you continue to justify your behavior means that you will never change. I do not want to be married to a cruel woman like you. Pack up your things and go back to your parents' place." Still in disbelief, Amelia attempted to protest again, but my mother, who had been silent until now, finally interrupted, clearly furious. She was upset at the circumstance, stating that although it was one thing to not enjoy the attention Katie got at the wedding, it was cruel to think of removing her from the photos. My mother informed Amelia that she should feel ashamed of herself for ever bringing up the subject, and she firmly expressed her support for David's choice. Amelia realized she had nothing left to stand on after hearing my mother's defense and witnessing David's uncompromising position. My husband appeared enraged, and I have no doubt that he would have physically assaulted Amelia for saying such awful things about our kid if she hadn't been my brother's wife at the time. Her actual nature had been exposed for everyone to see, and Amelia was outnumbered. She reluctantly left the house with only her phone and car keys because she had no other option. I was grateful that David stood up for Katie, but he later apologized to Roger and me for what his wife had said about our daughter. He has nothing to do with this. Probably after Amelia had gone to them in tears, Amelia's parents called David and my parents that evening to talk more about the matter. But David had asked for a break so he could calm himself and consider the situation. Amelia has been messaging me ever since the incident, essentially accusing me of causing friction between her and David. She believes that by agreeing to pay for a photo editor, I could have easily resolved their problems. Naturally, I don't want to be the reason my brother's marriage fails, but I also can't forgive what Amelia said to me about my kid. Update 1. I can't respond to everyone because I'm getting so many DMs and comments. I shall therefore make all the points clear here. Amelia was aware of Katie's friendship with my brother because she had previously met her. However, it appeared that she had been able to hide her contempt for my daughter for a long time. I had never had the slightest suspicion that she truly detested my kid to this extent. We try our best to make Katie feel as normal as possible so she doesn't feel like she is being treated differently because of her impairment, but I recognize that some people may find it awkward to see a child in a wheelchair, especially during a wedding. Regardless of the fact that Katie is in a wheelchair, I am sure that people would still find her attractive. She has her dad's blonde hair and blue eyes. Amelia was obviously merely attempting to point out my daughter's flaws out of jealousy. Katie's godfather is my brother. This is because I know that my husband will support my daughter no matter what happens to us. He is extremely protective of Katie since he loves her like his own daughter. It must have felt like a total betrayal to him to hear Amelia's statements and realize her actual intentions toward my daughter. Since Katie was absorbed in her cartoons, I doubt she heard anything Amelia and I said. She would have undoubtedly questioned me later if she had. Update 2. In case you were wondering, my brother is having his wedding revoked. My brother and his attorney are adamant that Katie lied to him from the beginning and tricked him into believing she would get along with his family when she wouldn't. Amelia panicked and tried desperately to keep her marriage intact when she realized that David was truly serious about leaving her. She made a pathetic attempt to apologize to me, but it was obvious to me that her words were not sincere. She wasn't prepared to accept responsibility for her actions or show true regret. Knowing that her apologies was merely a ruse to deflect criticism from herself, I was unable to accept it. Her rage was only increased by this. She became angry with me right away and accused me of destroying my brother's life. It seemed as though I was the cause of all her issues instead of the results of her own decisions. She accused me of being the one who made my brother leave her when he could have been content with her. As if that weren't enough, Amelia's parents also contacted my parents in an effort to place the responsibility for their daughter's struggles on Katie and me. Fortunately, my parents have denied this unjust claim. In particular, my dad expressed his disappointment, telling them that he is glad she will no longer be a part of our family and that they should be embarrassed of the daughter they raised. The fact that my family has supported Katie and me over this entire ordeal makes me really proud. I did apologize to my brother for what he was going through with Amelia when we spoke. He convinced me that knowing the truth about her now was preferable to later, when she may have said or done something more hurtful in front of Katie. I absolutely concur, and I'm relieved that we are also successfully removing Amelia from our lives. Update 3. My previous update was 4 months ago. For those who are curious, my brother is no longer married to Amelia after formally annulling their union. Everyone reacted negatively to Amelia after the truth about their failing marriage was made public. Eventually, she apologized to me, but I just blocked her without answering. We all had a vacation together not long ago. We had an amazing time together. I'm really happy that David and Katie still have such a wonderful connection. I'm thankful that the entire ordeal has only made our family ties stronger. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.